Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riffs? Talking about our favorite albums filled with riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, are my stooges in music, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. It feels great outside at the time of recording. Went from like being 16 degrees outside to being like 60.
I'm happy for you in that. It's still pretty dreary and miserable up here, unfortunately.
Good. You deserve
Good.
that.
Yeah, I do.
Dylan.
Angry. It's good. It's good. Tennessee's wet. It's dreary. It's drab. It's perfectly fitting to.
Yeah, it's wet.
It's perfectly fitting to the fact that you guys are morons. Jesus.
I'm excited for our episode today. I feel like I kind of picked this one because I admittedly, and if I get flack for it, I understand. I don't know a whole lot about this band. Or I didn't know a whole lot about this band going into this album. This wasn't a death metal band that I really grew up listening to, although I am aware that a lot of people love this band, rightfully so. They got a lot of riffs. There is maybe the time at which this band existed. They existed they had their time in the sun, and then they were just kind of done. I think they got back together maybe in the early 2000s, and then with a member dying, they were just done after that. But
they never broke up, from what I gathered. They finally broke up in like 2016 because I think the longtime drummer passed away, and it was just like, yeah, this is it. There's no like idea of a reunion, anything like that. They're like, 30 years, here we go. I think I had the same effect. I had the same effect from this band that you did, maybe. It was there. It was always there. I could listen to it. I knew the artwork. I knew the names. But I don't think I necessarily like sought out to listen to this, because the first time I really gave this band a lot of, listen time was a few years ago. And I was not necessarily the most engrossed in it, because I went like, okay, this is what you get kind of thing. It was, all right, there's cool riffs. Great. A lot of them. But then I'd listen to like maybe the album after this one, which I believe is Fourth Crusade. And I went, okay, sounds like War Master, or just consistent, kind of consistent. But that shows too how that can negatively affect maybe a listener as well as it can positively affect it. Like, I love Cannibal Corpse. There's not necessarily anything different about that band's output, right? Maybe little subtle things here and there. Same thing with this band. The album after this and the album before this album sound slightly different each time. However, still sounds, enough like the prior album.
Yeah.
And I think it just played negatively for me.
We're, of course, talking about Bolt Thrower, if you haven't guessed by some of the titles and the names being thrown around here. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe if I had found this band when I was younger, I would have been more prone to, liking them at the same level as your Deaths, your Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel. There's all of that stuff all over this record, but yeah, it wasn't on my radar. Like you said, it was always there, but there wasn't really a lot. I never had that person to maybe turn me on to this at a younger age. I kind of like found a lot of this stuff on my own. So perhaps if there was like that older person in my life that gave me War Master, Realm of Chaos or something like that. Yeah. If Swindle had done his due diligence, if he had played it at a party, then maybe I'd be speaking a different tune. But, with that said, I love listening to music, and, because there's such a gray area for me here, I wanted to like at least touch on this record, and I think this probably was a good place to start. War Master from 1991.
It's you've heard me say this. This band reminds me, or maybe it's the other way around. This band reminds me of Amon Amarth.
Okay.
You listen to any album in that band's catalog has the same kind of, it's very mid-tempo. I mean, they have their faster points, but it's mostly mid-tempo, kind of hard death metal. It's very tuneful. Kind of has a similar vibe with talking about like wars and battles and all of that. And I've always thought it was funny that, Bolt Thrower, a lot of people like this band, a lot. And seeing all like the, kind of great compliments and comments said about this band and its catalog, and it's kind of untouchable. And then like you have a band like Amon Amarth that, I listened to when I was younger, and it doesn't necessarily get the same type of credentials or cred that you would from the underground fans. It's like, it kind of sounds similar. Like, I'm sure the Amon Amarth dudes grew up listening to those early earache bands for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that they took a thing or two from them. I mean, yeah, they sing about some dorky shit, which is kind of the whole Viking thing. But let's face it, we're about to talk about some dorky shit.
Oh, yeah. There's some good nerds
it's
behind
there.
This band for sure. Speaking about contemporary bands too, I mean, I think there's definitely a resurgence, or at least more modern bands that will cite this band as an influence. Maybe more in recent years, you have a band like Frozen Soul, who, I think definitely draw some influence from this band as well.
Oh, Ice. Every album's about Ice. It's,
they got their thing. They're working with it.
I'm not knocking it all. I think it's, if I can be sold on a good gimmick, I'll buy into it.
Yeah. It's all in intent, right?
Yeah.
It's all in intent. And so, which is also a good point too. And, I'd been listening to the Metal Requiem podcast for many years at this point. And they do some really good deep dives on bands. And they made a really good point about bands who kind of draw on themes of war and like all these fantastical themes. And, there are definitely bands out there who write in that kind of battle. There's like big tanks and all that stuff. You could probably name some names, but I feel like some of it is like, it's almost like glorifying it, or, it's kind of a weird nationalistic like kind of thing, as they mentioned in the podcast. And this is kind of exploring those similar themes in a different way. It's all about intent, how you do it, what you're talking about. I think this is more or less like the negatives of war. And, obviously this band has kind of written about these things throughout their career. I think this album today is on the more kind of mythological, kind of fantastical side of things. Whereas over time you kind of progress and you get better in songwriting. You actually start writing about real things that happened, real wars and events in history. But enough of my jabbering. I want to hear from Swindle. Swindle, do you have any prior knowledge of this band? Did you listen to this band before this episode? What did you think?
I didn't even listen to this band for this episode.
Yeah.
Christ. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. I've never listened to the band before you picked this record.
Damn. So going into, did you have any sort of preconceived notion of it? Like when you look at the artwork, or what did you think going in, and what did you think coming out on the other side?
I didn't look up anything about the band when you said you wanted to do a record, so I didn't even really know that they had 3 or 4 other records that were like the war records or whatever. And I also don't have a huge foundation of listening to death metal. A lot of the song, there basically was at least one riff in every song that I was like, oh, this riff is really fucking catchy.
Yeah.
It usually was the slower riffs, the parts that weren't during the blast beats or the really fucking fast parts. But also all those riffs that I thought were catchy, they kind of sound the same, or they have a similar feel if they don't sound exactly the same.
There's a lot of consistency with this group for sure. Like
Yeah.
from start to finish, you pretty much got like an ass beater of a record. And yeah, maybe sometimes with this record, it can be hard to kind of discern certain things. It does all kind of have a similar feel to it, like you mentioned. But yeah, I think there are definitely some standout riffs on this thing. And I think the slower parts are definitely moments where they shine. This band kind of started out more in the kind of grind world, which we'll get into in a moment. But here, I feel like you kind of see them abandoning more of the faster blast beat parts. So they're still there, but after this record, it kind of goes more in this vein of like just kind of groovy, kind of slower paced mid-tempo death metal.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 tracks on here with blast beats on it, and then as you said, there's nothing on another record after it. There's not a blast beat one on any other record.
Not a one. I guess maybe we should get into the backstory of this band. This band started out between a couple schoolmates in Liverpool, a skiffle group, if I believe is the correct term. Just a couple kids, a couple bowl cuts getting out there. Hamburg, Germany. I can't
wait
until this.
I can't wait until they do press in their 70s and they're like, oh yeah, we just all jacked off in a room together.
Like,
what do you
like
mean?
The Beatles. The Beatles.
Oh, I don't. I got my notes confused. Excuse me. Weird. Just I thought Bolt Thrower was a little skiffle group on the edge of town, just performing on pots and pans and little jugs.
They sounded so similar. The Beatles.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy. It makes me think of the Spinal Tap bit where it's just, you got what I want. Anyway, this band did start kind of in they kind of formed through the hardcore and the grind scene that was kind of coming up through England at the time. They started in Coventry, England in the mid 80s.
Formed in a pisser.
Yep.
Formed in a pisser.
It's formed in the bathroom. Basically, we're at a hardcore show in a pub. 2 guys met. Of course, I'm talking about Gavin Ward, their bass player, and Barry Thompson. They were basically just kind of connected in the bathroom and decided to form a band
Standing
together.
at the trough, just crossing streams the entire time.
They definitely had more of a crust grind influence initially. Bands like Crass, bands like Discharge. There's also a lot of Slayer influence. You can definitely hear it on this record, and definitely some of the previous stuff. Yeah. I listened to Realm of Chaos before getting into this as well, and you can definitely hear some of those Carrie and Jeff style riffs. Also a lot of chaotic Kerry King soloing on this record.
Oh, the nonsense solos.
Just go for it.
It's just there's a quote from Kerry King, like he got asked years later about the No Sleep Till Brooklyn cameo. I'm not even going to say the story, but he was like, yeah, I wasn't the guitar virtuoso I am now when I recorded that. And I was like, all right, cool.
I used to watch,
all right, man.
I used to watch they had the Combat Tour, like a VHS or whatever.
Yes.
And it was Slayer, Venom, and Exodus.
Yes.
Kick out! Kick out, slow downy. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. I say fuck the pen, cause you can die by the sword.
And yeah, there's some of those old records that are a lot of fun. They got a lot of character to them. I'll just say that. And hey,
you know what that means.
You know what? The guys sold a lot of records, and I'm in a bedroom somewhere talking about it. So, more power to them. So, basically this band forms in a bathroom, and, they kind of form some members or get some members pretty quickly. You have Andrew Whale and Alan West. They release a demo. They use this title a lot in Battle. There Is No Law. I wonder if any other band would take any influence from that at all.
Fucking imagine what other band would have taken influence from that.
It's a damn good title. Both of those records they're great. That's a great phrase.
Yeah.
I love it. So
yeah, and it took like doing research on this and seeing that and going, huh?
Yeah,
it
was right
imagine.
There. It was right there all along.
The entire time.
Can I just say that starting a band with someone in the bathroom is a very Dylan move? Like, I feel like Dylan would be at a show and somebody would have blown up the fucking bathroom so bad, and Dylan just be like, "Man, I just want to say congrats. Do you want to play guitar in a band with me?
I like the cut of your jib, sir."
Hey, man,
you had spinach today too, huh?
Real recognizes real.
Man, those
how it goes.
Those sound cavernous. What's your name?
You broke him.
God damn, I bet that guy sounds good with a mic. Can you make it come out the other end, man?
I can't wait to hear that on the record.
Get this boy an Iron Bird. Let's see what happens. So they get a couple demos under their belt, and somehow I think their second demo, which is called Concession of Pain from '87, gets in the hand of one John Peel. And if you're familiar with John Peel, he's a very famous, legendary BBC radio DJ who was known for breaking a lot of bands, especially bands in the kind of metal genre or grindcore, really specifically. I mean, he's kind of known for putting Napalm Death on the radio. He played, their very famously short song, You Suffer, that's like, a second and a half, and then invited the band to actually record some Peel sessions, which were also very famous. So they would basically have bands come in, they'd record typically 4 songs and, broadcast them on the BBC Radio 1. So this band recorded their sessions, which essentially got them a deal with one Vinyl Solutions, which I guess was like kind of an offshoot label of an actual record store in the area. And so then they released their album, the LP, their first album, In Battle There Is No Law, from '88. They also kind of, I think through like this demoing process and the record process, they would also get some new members as well. They have Joe Bench, who was, I believe, Gavin Ward's then girlfriend at the time.
Correct.
Replaced Alex Tweedy, who was a very like short-lived bass player.
Well, we also missed too that like Gavin switched over to guitars not terribly long after the band started.
Right. There's a lot of switching of hands. I think Gavin wanted to be on guitar, and so then you get Alex Tweedy on bass. He may have played like a show or something. He was supposed to like record the demo, but he didn't show up the day they were doing it. So then Joe Bench fills in on bass and
had to go to the pub, man.
Had to go to the pub.
So formed a new band.
They get a little notoriety on the Peel sessions. They get the label, or they get the deal through Vinyl Solutions, and then record their debut. They actually also get Carl Willits before recording this debut record, who is on the next few records as well. Or is he on the remainder of this band's discography? I don't think.
He is. He joined in '88, so right around the time of the first record. Left in like '94.
Oh, okay.
Which is left in '94, but like came back at multiple times, like recorded different albums with them, and then came back full time. So like they've only had 2 vocalists the entire career, but he's came back multiple times.
Gotcha. So starts here, debut. The band, as I understand it, was pretty displeased with being on this label. I think they were a more straightforward, like hardcore punk label. Didn't really market the band well. Maybe they didn't know how. And so they leave and essentially form a contract with Earache, which, of course, as we've mentioned many times in other episodes, you got Napalm Death, Carcass, Terrorizer, all of these like pretty pivotal, extreme metal bands kind of coming out of this label. Really pivotal releases throughout this era of music.
It's wild to think that the UK is not massive. England is not a massive country, and you've got all of these quintessential death and grind bands that all were signed to the same label around the same time. You know, yeah, you had some of the American bands like Morbid Angel was signed to Earache, but you had Napalm Death, you had Carcass, you had Bolt Thrower. I think Extreme Noise Terror was signed to Earache for a short amount of time. But like you had all these kind of weirdly European centric bands being signed to it around this point. And this band's no different. I mean, coming from that, you know, kind of grind, art punk, kind of anarcho scene that they were all involved with at the time, and coming off of maybe a demo label or a smaller label that put out, you know, your first record, and you're like, we already can see that the writing on the wall with this first deal. Like, let's sign to Earache that has all these bands we're friends with and or, you know, listen to.
Some of the band names that were on Vinyl Solution are fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Bomb Disneyland was the name of the band.
Jesus.
Oh, man.
Fudge Tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's Earache's. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was one of the Iowa Beef Experience? What the fuck is that?
Christ.
So they have their debut record. Realm of Chaos in '89 was released on Earache. I think this certainly has more of a grind kind of sound to it. It's still, you know, like doing the blasts a little bit more than you would hear on this record.
I want to bring up one thing about Realm of Chaos is that album is tuned to fucking A.
That really?
Album is tuned to A. Like it's low. That is, when you look at like baritone tunings, that's a step below a baritone tuning. That is like, that's Korn's tuning, if that makes sense. That is what they tuned to. And these guys were using, you know, 6-string guitars, 4-string bass. And I think it's even quoted in that Requiem podcast. They were talking about Joe's like bass sound, and they're like, yeah, the note couldn't even pick up. It was just like a click. So like the first like legitimate record, like with big backing, was done in A, and it's fucking wild that they could even like keep those things in tune at this point. I'm sure the strings they were finding aren't like we can find today, where you can go and like just walk into a Guitar Center. It's like, oh yeah, I'll take the heaviest gauge thing you got, and it's like a 65. I'm sure back then it was like, hey, give me the pink pack of Ernie balls and I'll just make it work.
It's wild that, you know, there is someone who could capture bands like this, and, you know, with all the drop tunings and or low tunings rather, and, you know, just the intensity at which they're playing. But you really have to kind of give it up to the album's producer, Colin Richardson, who kind of a local guy. He's a British producer. He began his career as a studio engineer at Slaughterhouse Studios, which was kind of a local studio and maybe like a residential part of East Yorkshire, England. It was called Slaughterhouse Studios because it was literally built on the old site of a slaughterhouse. This guy was basically worked as the in-studio engineer, and I guess
Digby Pearson
basically sent Napalm Death over to the studio to record their EP, Mentally Murdered, in '89. And, you know, I guess they like the way that came out. I don't know if he had much experience recording music like this. I think the one particular album that I know he had worked on was Discharge EP, Y. But through this process, they recorded the EP. It went well. Earache just kept sending bands over. And so he kind of becomes like the Scott Burns of this area, recording like hundreds of albums under his name. I mean, he basically worked with Bolt Thrower the entire duration of their career. He worked with Brutal Truth, Cannibal Corpse, Carcass, Fear Factory, Fudge Tunnel, Machine Head, Napalm Death. So you have all of these bands, and I think you really wouldn't have this sound on Earache without Colin Richardson at the board, kind of working the ones and twos and everything.
It's wild to think that some of making the nod to him being like the UK's version of Scott Burns. That's wild because I've never put that together. But I get it because, you know, the US had their guy, and, you know, the UK's got their guy as well. And seeing how what he's done with his career, because I've known about Colin Richardson forever, and seeing what he did with his career and how he's made bands sound. Sometimes it's you go back on like a producer or an engineer or a mixer's early part of their career, and you hear the first couple records they do or the first few, and it's like, oh, okay, they're feeling it out, like they're figuring everything out. And then you can find a couple records kind of in the middle that you go, that's exactly what they wanted with the first records too. Like there it is. I mean, overall, this record, War Master, sounds really, really good. Earache's kind of a weird label. I know a lot of bands that have left that label have not said very nice things about that label. I think that label, I don't know this for a fact. This is all speculation, but I think they may owe a lot of bands a lot of money. Whoever heard of that in the record business? Allegedly, there it is. And I actually think that they still release like the back catalog because they know that where the bread and butter is going to come from. If you're getting anything off the Earache website, you're getting something from the back catalog. And I think there's been points where like even Bolt Thrower have pointed out like, hey, don't buy that re-release. We're making no money from it. Like don't touch it. I actually believe Realm of Chaos had like a remaster or something like that in like 2005. And the band publicly stated, we're making no money from that because they remastered it. So we don't endorse this, anything like that. But Colin Richardson, great producer. As you said, done a lot of classic records. I always lean to Cannibal Corpse's Bloodthirst because it just sounds massive. There's a Ben Falgu quote. He says like, yeah, Colin Richardson just makes heavy shit sound even fucking heavier.
Not a bad quote. A bad endorsement there for sure. This is the last album recorded at Slaughterhouse Studios. Apparently 2 weeks after the album was completed, they lost it in a fire, which thank God that they were able to like kind of do the record, put in all that work. It's kind of crazy that you didn't just lose it in the aftermath of that. But the very last album to be recorded here, according to Metallum and all that stuff. But
probably a good thing that they got the tapes to wherever they were supposed to fucking go after they recorded the shit.
It seemed like it would have been a really cool place to record it. There was an article I read kind of talking about it. And, it's like a lot of these bands probably hadn't recorded in a proper space before. You might only spend like a couple days on something. Whereas here, I think, some of these bands would spend, maybe like a week or so at a time. And it's like also residential. So you could actually like stay, in the space above it or whatever, and just really kind of work and craft on everything. So a very unfortunate thing, but a lot of really cool records came out of that place.
You're not going to sit there and tell me that Carcass's Reek of Putrefaction didn't have time spent on it. You're not going to tell me that those guys didn't take longer than 6 hours to record that whole thing.
Hey, maybe they didn't.
You are not going to sit there and fill me that line of shit. No way.
So you got Gavin Ward, you got Andrew Whale, Carl Willits, Joe Bench, Barry Thompson, all coming together to make this record. I'd be remiss to talk about the artwork as well. I mean, the classic Bolt Thrower artwork. Pete Nifton is credited with taking the helm to create this artwork. Now, Pete Nifton, I find, he was an artist for Fighting Fantasy game books, which is another role-playing game in that kind of game workshop thing. I don't know if it was specifically for Game Workshop, but Fighting Fantasy had game books. He's also credited with doing a run of like Transformer comics during this time as well. But he apparently was their former like head designer for Game Workshop.
Yes.
So they originally on Realm of Chaos, they had John Civic, who had created the artwork for a game book on their sophomore album, the same name, for Warhammer 40K, right? Mm-hmm. And so Games Workshop heard the second Peel Sessions tape and offered to contribute artwork for the album. And so that's what they use. They basically used the I think the game book artwork for the album. And a lot of the songs on that record are also influenced by parts of the game, for sure. Not because that they wanted to try to entice the deal. Literally, they were just fans of the tabletop game. They were fans of doing Warhammer 40K, I guess. I've never played it. I've only been to a Games Workshop one time. They have a store near me. And when I would drive past it, as a kid, I was like, oh, there's a video game store and everything. Nope. We got to get Mom, Dad, take me to a video game store. I walk in and I see all these tables with the trees and all these little pieces. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I've never understood it. More power to you if you play it. I don't think I have the brain capacity for something like that, but I was severely disappointed walking into that store.
One of my best friends is really into it, gets together, puts all the stuff together, they play it, they go through the whole thing. And it's obviously it's very D&D-esque. That's the original kind of tabletop game. But it's you buy the models, I guess would be the correct terminology for it. You paint them, you do whatever you want with them. Dude, this company, Game Workshop, they got to be fucking loaded. I've seen what some of those cost, and it's no joke to me that of course they, maybe the band was oh shit, we probably shouldn't pay that for the next record we do with them. We got to figure out another route.
So essentially what happens is that they are making this record. Games Workshop offers to provide them with more artwork for the album, but it's far too expensive. So they basically get a guy who used to work for the company to make the artwork, and that's how you do it. So it looks great. It looks awesome.
It looks great.
It's a brutal cover for sure. Very fitting.
I do want to I touched on this earlier about the remaster of Realms of Chaos. It's got different artwork. It's still in the same vein, but I don't think it's the original Games Workshop.
Oh,
artwork.
Okay. So I had that wrong.
I think, the original pressing of the album is the original artwork, is the one from the actual book of the same title. But when they did the remaster in 2005, the one the band kind of was against, I don't think Earache could afford to still use the same artwork. At least that's how I'm interpreting it.
Or didn't want to pay for it or whatever.
There it is.
Yeah.
And it's still in the same vein. And I mean, this band, after this album, they didn't really use the Games Workshop stuff too much more, except for one album. I believe it's called Mercenary, which came later in the band's career.
That one always kind of reminded me of I don't know, what is it, Metal Gear Solid or whatever. Kind of looks like something like that. Anytime I see this band's artwork, I always think of Twisted Metal for some reason. Interesting.
Like the old PS1 game.
Sure,
Swindle's chuckling. Yeah. I always think to that for some reason. It's just end of the world shit. Or it's the Battle of Hoth.
There's a lot of that on this record. Kind of getting into the track list here. I kind of perused the lyric sheet online just to kind of see what some of these songs were about. And it is very mythical. There's the biggest theme I can really take from a lot of these lyrics is that mankind sucks. We'll just kill them all. Just kill everybody. It whether it be, I don't know if it is orcs or an off-world kind of creature, but whatever it is, it's here to kill everybody and destroy everything in its path.
Space Marines, man. It's like aliens. It's like Ridley or James Cameron.
Both Ridley Scott, James Cameron,
James Ridley.
Scott. We open with kind of this atmospheric intro in the beginning. Big guitars, a lot of tremolo kind of riffage, and wouldn't you know it, lyrics just kill all humans.
I voted for Kodos.
There's a track on here that literally just made me think of a Futurama bit. It is Profane Creation.
Mm-hmm.
And primitive caveman riffs for sure, but it's literally about a human killing machine. And I just think of the Bender line, hey baby, wanna kill all humans?
Jesus. this album, I did want to say they tuned up for.
Okay.
This album's in C sharp and not in A anymore because they played a couple. I think they played 1 or 2 shows when they were tuned to A, and the guys were like, "It was impossible. We had no stage sound." They're like, "It was just mud the entire time," and they're like, "Yeah, we tuned it to C sharp and we like it a lot better."
It sounds like a great record. Like I said, like kind of said earlier, it's very consistent. What Dwells Within, Morbid Angel Slayer kind of riff, that one finger kind of thing that they got going. And of course, there's a Kerry King solo to boot. Very chaotic, very like they got dive bombs in it. Just hey, whatever works, just go for it. That's the Kerry King motto, right?
Like while I thoroughly enjoyed this record a lot, it actually gave me a better perspective of the band. This is one of those records that when an album sounds very similar all the way through, or the band's catalog kind of sounds similar, I have to listen to it more to really like discern things sometimes and find maybe the tracks that I really like. Sorry, Swindle.
I was just going to say, it's easy to get lost if you're not like, if you're like trying to do something, work or work out or what the fuck ever. When you're listening to something that sounds kind of similar, it's easy to just like at the end of the record be like, oh, this is the outro. Damn. I missed it.
Like this album's a lot of fun, and it makes me want to go back and listen to Realms one more time, and maybe even check some of the later catalog, the Metal Blade side of things too. But like this is a fun record. But however, I noticed the more I listened to it over the last couple weeks, the more I was like, oh, there's that track I really like a lot, or there's that riff I really like a lot, or like there's the blast part I really enjoy. But it's we're going through the tracks and like they're all really good. They're all well written. They all have great riffs. But I noticed there's a lot of carryover with some of the tracks as well. Like some of the riffs are very reminiscent to the first a couple songs at the beginning of the record to the end of the record. Like there's that kind of, it's a very Slayer thing. That's the only way I could put it. Those half note kind of like things. There's the track called Slayer has a track called God Hates Us All. And there's a little kind of tail into that riff. And there's a lot of riffs like that on this album. And it's very like, it's very pummeling. This record is a lot of double kick throughout the record, kind of rudimentary death metal stuff there. It's done well. The band obviously puts a lot of time and effort into writing these tracks and doing all this. But what I really love about the record more are the fucking song titles. I love the song titles on this album.
Shreds of Sanity, Profane Creation, Final Revelation, Cenotaph, which I guess is like a memorial or statue to kind of commemorate like people who several people who have died in battle.
That might be my favorite track on the record.
It's a standout for sure. I think it's the only one that has a music video too.
I didn't even realize this band had a music video.
I found a music video online on the Earix page. So whether it be one that they made after or whatever, I don't know. But this is kind of a standout in that it is a thematic continuation of a previous song from Realm of Chaos, World Eater, which also is based on some Warhammer stuff as well.
It's even used later, like on further records as well.
One of the first songs I ever heard by this band is called Powder Burns from Mercenary. And that's a continuation of this song as well. So you have basically World Eater, Cenotaph, Embers from the Fourth Crusade, Powder Burns, and then Kill Chain, which is on For Those Once Loyal. And
the very last album.
Right. So kind of a cool little thing, you know, like a multi-part kind of series of songs using that kind of, it like fades in very similar. Like I know Powder Burns starts kind of the same way. But kind of a cool like little tying of records together for sure. All that carryover.
I mean, it's very clear too, like this band was very apt in what they were doing in their craft of how they were going. All right, we want the next record to have some, subject matter or a tie-in with the most recent one. We want records that are in the same vein that have this tie-in. So it definitely seems like maybe they just got more apt into talking about war throughout their career. They always kind of kept a throwback to maybe some of the more game influenced albums that they had earlier in the career. You know, it's a great record. It's straightforward. It's as straightforward as it can really get. It's not too out of the box. Like, it's very, you could hand this album probably to someone that is just really starting to get into like aggressive music and go, hey, death metal's pretty atonal. It's pretty extreme. There's some shit out there that you're going to hear that's not going to sound pleasant to you immediately. Maybe listen to this. Maybe give this a shot.
Probably one of those tracks that stands out for me as well is the title track, War Master. I love the groove on this riff. There's some really cool guitar breaks in it as well. There's double bass, and this might be one of the few songs that actually has blasts on it. You know, I think this one also, there are some, like, again, we keep mentioning like the Kerry King kind of chaotic solo. This one has more of like a musical, it starts out kind of more musical in that there's melody. It's not just like all over the fretboard. It does have that, but it also, I think there's a little bit more consideration for the lead lines as well.
Yes.
And then lyrically,
melodic lead lines at that. There's some melodic guitar playing on this album.
Lyrically, it is fitting with kind of all the other tracks where, you know, the War Master's kind of coming down to give man a taste of his own medicine. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I can always tie something to wrestling or some sort of like active combat sport like that that's enjoyable. There is a professional fighter named Josh Barnett, and his nickname is the War Master. The dude walks out to any fight he's in to, what's the big track off the Fourth Crusade? It may be the title track off that record. And that is a terrifying human being. Like, does catch wrestling, like does professional wrestling, does like wrestling announcement, but like all of his merch looks like bolt thrower merch. Like his font and like his logo is all in the bolt thrower thing. So like he's a big fan of this band.
There's always crossover, right? We see that now.
Terrifying.
We see it then. It's all
everywhere. Swindle will get this. I think there was an old Shayna Baszler promo where she's wearing a bolt thrower shirt. She's legitimately in a bolt thrower shirt.
It's a quick listen. It's like a little over 40 minutes. I think, kind of like I said earlier, there are a lot of things I like about this record. It does have like moments where Swindle mentioned as well, where I was doing things like I was at work and I kind of work in a more physical job. So I'm not really like thinking about what is occurring all the time. So it at least serves as like a really nice backdrop for lifting heavy shit. And then, you know, when I had moments where I'm just not doing anything and I really want to kind of dissect the album, there's a lot to enjoy on this record. There's a lot of layering and guitar parts on this record that sound really cool. Had I had this record when I was younger, I probably would put it up there with, you know, Death's Leprosy, or like those kind of more primitive sounding rhythmic death metal records that, you know, it doesn't have to be anything sort of flashy, but it is just a very good, well-crafted record. Swindle, as a person who hadn't heard this record before, were there any tracks that kind of stuck out to you? Any particular things about the record when listening to it for the first time?
Profane Creation was my favorite song. It had like, there were like 5 fucking riffs on that one song that I was like, oh, like the opening riff happens. And I was like, oh, damn, that's a pretty catchy riff. And then like 40 seconds later, there's another riff. And I was like, damn, the song has 2 really catchy riffs. And then like a fucking another one. And I was like, whoa, like, what are they doing? What are they doing for this song?
All the riffs.
Yeah. I think that was like the song for me that stuck out. I don't remember which song it is, but there was a different song like later, and it may have been like Rebirth of Humanity or Cenotaph that I was like, oh shit, this riff is like my favorite riff on the album, but I don't remember right now which one it even was. So
there's some, I mean, even End's pretty cool. I like the Afterlife
kind of fade out to it.
Yeah, it ends, or I mean, it's like a more of a faster track to kind of end the record.
I love the back half of this record. I think the whole B-side technically of this album, because the one I listened to had the CD track on it. It had a Destructive Infinity on it.
Yeah, which is, if you're on streaming, and maybe this is the, kind of reissue or the remaster, I guess, with the full dynamic or whatever. It's not on the full dynamic version of the album, but it's on the, I guess, the original version or whatever, the one that they say is from 91. But yeah, they got Destructive Infinity, which I guess is also kind of funny too, a bonus track that appears in the middle of the record.
I'm presuming maybe with that, since it does appear in the middle of the record, it was a CD only track. And that was obviously to push like CDs becoming the next format to use. But I'm wondering if they put it in there because if they wanted to press it to vinyl, maybe it had to be a certain length for A side, B side. I think there's probably a time limit for each side where the sound will start to degrade a little bit. But like, it's a cool track. It doesn't sound like just like a B side written for it. It sounds like a track that they just kind of didn't put on there. I love the whole B side of this album. I think that's got some of my favorite shit on it. Starting with Cenotaph, however it's pronounced. Starting with that, going all the way to Afterlife. I think those are just fantastic songs.
There's some good touring for this record. In Europe, they were on tour with Nocturnus and Unleashed, which would have been a really fucking cool tour to see. And then in the US, the War Mass tour alongside Believer and Sacrifice. And apparently, from what I read online, they were using basically like an old school bus as their like touring vehicle for the US tour. And they apparently just had a bunch of computer games on it, like in between cities.
It is 1991, like 92 pushing it. Like this Terminator 2 has just came out or is about to come out. How are they playing video games on a bus in 1991 going across America?
I just
How is that
imagine
happening?
You hit a pothole and whatever fucking like, I don't know.
Blowing the cartridge.
Yeah.
Did they carry a generator with them? Like,
right.
Yeah, I can't imagine like a tower being in the back of a bus.
Jesus.
Imagine all those fucking extension cords they got dragging, the orange extension cord dragging behind the school bus.
Jesus.
Or, I mean, or could you like imagine this? They're on a school bus and they're like playing tabletop games in this, like pull the seats out, like brakes go just, and those like models are made out of like ceramic and clay.
Yeah.
Like just hitting the front of that bus, just someone losing it because they're really like nice one has just been maimed because someone has stepped on it. Like,
are the room? I mean, I guess a school bus is pretty long, but you got like what, 5 people in the band? Like,
yeah,
I couldn't take that extra pedal. I gotta make sure.
Hey man, Jimmy couldn't take his guitar home.
Yeah. That's true. That's right. We did. That's fair.
Like,
I will say, on a completely different note, a school bus is probably easy to keep all the stink out. Like
that's very true.
A lot of metal. It doesn't keep the stench in off the touring musicians as easily as like a rug or something.
Everyone's just holed up in the corner trying to stay warm, driving through like fucking Utah in the winter. They're just just nothing but steel in there, so everything you touch is pain. It's like the Frank scene in Hellraiser, just terrifying. Just everything is pain.
The heater on school buses is so fucking loud too.
Dude, those things are. I remember I like rode the bus all through school. And God forbid you got the seat where the heater is, because that shit just would like singe your leg hairs and all that shit.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
You had heaters on your school buses?
Oh, whatever. Well, you got
I guess they didn't need it in Arkansas. It was 90 degrees in fucking December.
The school buses that I rode on didn't even have the pop-out windows on the side, like the emergency exit windows. They were just the big drop-down ones that are like, yeah, you weren't getting out of those.
Dylan's busting at floors in it. He was just they had to get a running start like some Flintstone shit.
Yeah. Well.
hey man, it's just like that. It's like that old like Social Distortion movie where they're having to run the bus into like LA, like they're pushing the bus they're touring in.
That was every school in Arkansas.
Yeah, just like it.
As an album I didn't really have any sort of knowledge of, or a band I really didn't have a relationship with growing up. I like checking this out. You know, I know this is kind of maybe a different episode for us in that maybe none of us really had sort of like a history with this band necessarily, but we love checking out new stuff, and this was like definitely an opportunity. There's going to be some episodes in the future where I just wanted to explore this world, and maybe this kind of opens the door and kind of allows us to maybe do some further research on some other albums from this band, or maybe some other bands that we aren't really necessarily accustomed to. So do you guys have any final thoughts on this album, perhaps this band?
So I'm definitely going to go back and dig into this band's catalog a little bit. This album started to grow on me because I actually listened to this album a lot to really dig into it. Because I think, like yourself, I didn't really give this band a whole lot of time because I got into death metal. Like, it was immediately some of the most brutal shit you could possibly get immediately. Like, it was Cannibal Corpse. Like, once you hear vocals like that, hearing vocals like on a Bolt Thrower record, you're not really going to be able to go, okay, I can go back to that. You got to move forward. But if I had this band maybe early on, maybe when I was getting into like In Flames and Dark Tranquility, Entombed, stuff like that, that would have fit right in. It would have been a great segue getting into like harder and harder shit. And I probably would have appreciated this band a lot more. And now I can listen to it and go, hey, there's some really fun shit on there and some really cool stuff. Like, I could put this on and like go on a run or like, work out to it and not have to focus too much in on it and just enjoy it. I'm definitely going to check it out. A lot more of this band's catalog when I can get a chance to.
We've reached that part of the episode where we like to recommend some things we've been listening to as of late. I have an older one. I haven't really been listening to a lot of new stuff this week, but revisiting some old classics. We've been kind of talking about albums that we want to do in the future. And there's an EP, of course, Nothing Lasts, by the California hardcore, power violence, whatever you want to call it, band Punch. This is an EP that's like just 10 minutes long. You can really blow through it, but it is intense. I feel like when I listen to it, like the vocalist Megan is just like yelling directly at me, telling me to like get off my ass and go do something. I love this. This came out like in 2011, I want to say. It's been a long time since this band probably disbanded, but I love that this EP is out there. You can just enjoy it if you're doing shit, going for a walk, maybe need a little kick in the ass. You can turn this on and it'll probably do the job. So listen to Nothing Lasts, Punch.
I also listened to an older record this week that I liked. That album is called Worm Hat by a band named Wrong, but it's RONG is how you spell it. It's complete fucking chaos. I don't really know how to. It's kind of hardcore, but it's mostly just fucking wild. They're doing wild shit musically, but it's fun. Apparently, also recorded by Will Killingsworth. So there you go. He recorded everything.
So I've only got one rec this week. It's a new single. It's their first single from a band that I have been stoked to hear something from for about a year. It's a Nashville-based band called Pelagius. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. This band shares members with the band Knoll, who we've talked about in the past. They released their debut single called Looping Effects of Humankind. It will be coming out on Total Dissonance Worship Records. On February 8th, they'll be releasing a 3-song EP. This is like dissonant sounding, just very primal, almost immolation meets like Blood Os Nord or like Deathspell Omega. There's some old like early 2000s kind of metalcore vibes to it as well, with like bands like Yautja, bands like Gaza, that sort of thing kind of thrown in there. This is some heavy shit. The production sounds really good on it. You can hear every instrument in there. I am real stoked to hear more from this band after just seeing them one time.
Oh, you saw them?
It might have been their first show. I saw them open up for, I believe it was Artificial Brain.
Oh, cool. That's
it was
awesome.
either Artificial Brain or the Blood Incantation show I went to.
All right, that's what we've been listening to this week. Check them out. Do you want to see us do a particular deep dive on a record or band? What have you? Comment below. We'll be back next week talking more about riffs. You can follow us at Distortion891, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter for all updates on this show, as well as our live show, Vocal Distortion, which airs every Monday from 6 p.m. Central. Got some more things on the way, but for me, Swindle, Dylan, we'll see you next week. Bye.